in my travels teaching bonsai, I've noticed there are various problems that crop up time and time again. Always the same things, and a lot of these things confuse people and cause all sorts of problems, and ultimately leave people feeling quite dissatisfied with the trees they have on their benches. Today I'd like to deal with one of those problems for you, and it's very simple, it's very quick, and it's very easy, and it makes an average tree into something much better. The tree we'll be looking at today is an English hornbeam. This is a native of the UK and a very popular tree for bonsai. This is very typical of the type of tree that's produced from this material, probably originally from nursery stock, and as is usually the way with these things, it's been cut down from a much larger tree. And if I just rotate this, you'll see here a big saw cut. From the front it kind of looks okay, but from the back it's ugly, and I've obtained this tree because the previous owner was dissatisfied with it. And so basically what I want to show you today is a simple technique to be able to deal with this and make this tree into a much better quality bonsai. I've just used some raffia to tie these small branches out of the way, and looking closely at this cut you can see it's absolutely flat, and you can still make out the saw marks where the original trunk was removed. We've had a few years of callus growth around the edge here, which you see is rolling in quite nicely, and around the edge there's a very sharp edge of dry bark, which was where the original cut was made. So because we've got this callus rolling nicely, this is a perfect candidate to be able to hollow this, and the callus will gradually roll into the hole and will look very natural. At the base here you can see there's no callus tissue at all, and that's because there's no sap flow here. The callus tissue only happens where the sap flow goes past the cut, which is why there's so much callus tissue on either side but nothing at the bottom. So what we're going to do is actually extend this cut downwards and make it slightly larger, and at the same time hollow it out to make it look much more interesting. The first job here is to remove this dry line of old bark with a very sharp knife. You can see there's no green here. This bark is completely dead on the edge. So just remove that till we just touch the green underneath. Like so, and then just give that a scrape. What that helps to do is integrate this callus tissue into this original bark, so this then looks much more natural. Having cleaned the bark around the edges, so the next thing to do is start to remove some of this wood. I could do this with a small tool mounted at a Dremel or something, but for the sake of this demonstration I'm going to be using some larger tools. Now what I have to be careful of is that I remove the wood from the middle, but I don't undermine this bark too carefully, because we do need bark and sapwood to keep this area alive. And at the same time I'm going to extend this a little bit lower to give this a much more natural appearance. At this point you can see the difference between the wood that's alive and the wood that's dead. Where I've hit this very pale buff coloured wood underneath, that's sapwood and that is still alive, whereas you can see where this cut has happened, the wood has died back underneath. And it's okay to take a small amount of this sapwood away, but we don't want to take too much of it away, because if we do we'll restrict the sap flow up this extension part of the trunk. I'm now going to use a much smaller tool to undercut some of this bark very slightly, so that in the future, as this callus continues to form, it will roll into this hole, and that will give the tree a very natural look. The next part of this operation is going to involve creating a hollow at this point. Here I've got a little piece of wood which I'm going to leave, and then hollow down behind that. That's going to help me to create some shadow and some interest at this point. And because I've got a lot of wood in the other side of the trunk here, I know I can remove a reasonable amount of wood from here safely. What I want to do now is put some detail in this part of the trunk where this deadwood is, so that it's not just a flat, smooth piece of wood. Now the last part of this operation just requires a small hobby tool. Here I'm using a small wire brush, and I'm just going to take all this fibrous material, all this fuzz, away from the wood that we've cut. The final part of this operation just involves staining this wood. Here I'm using a little bit of very dark brown. It's a white spirit based wood stain that you can obtain in any hardware store. We've made a hollow here which obviously is going to attract some water, and I know that will bother a lot of people, but any rot that happens in that hole cannot infect the live part of the tree, so it's not going to cause the trunk to collapse or anything else. It's a perfectly natural situation for this type of material to have a hollow inside it naturally which retains water. In time that will just go down into the middle of the tree and find its way out of the bottom, so it really won't cause any problem to this material at all. That black looks a little bit severe, but by the morning that will have dried out and that will just be a nice dark brown. So we've now got a nice natural looking hollow in this tree, which will have some shadow in it, and it kind of fixes that awful saw cut that we had to start with.